Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahweh Shai, Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahweh Shai, Barakata Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Kakadash, double honors and salutations to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who rule well, to the Akim Akrath, throughout the four corners of the earth, holding on in sincerity and in truth to the gospel, Lord Amashak Yahweh Shai. With diligence of mind, this is Brahmanasha, DCKM, short lesson for the hopeful elect. You are clearly aware of the U.S. military's position over there in the Middle East against Iran. And when you see the breakdown of their psychological mindset, you see the complaints coming in. You see the fragile nature of Esau's military-industrial complex. You see the weak points. Then you understand that his victory is not sustainable. All right, because that's just how the Lord has planned it out for Esau. All right, he cannot win without the Most High's authorization, and that's one thing that is happening now. The soldiers, have to deal with this mental health crisis. Basically, you just said demons plaguing them, man. That's just what it is, man. Because being on a war sheep, at the behest of the super elite, the little hats, to bring about death and destruction, it doesn't sit well with the military service members. So when you have a conflict of minds upon the vessel, aboard the vessel, you start seeing mutiny. All right, so that's what's going to happen eventually, man. The Lord will have to bring about a division, and that division is going to cause a lot of chaos. It's going to spill over to different aspects of Esau's society. And you already hear that the parents are complaining about their loved ones, their children being on board. Wives talking about how their husbands are not receiving the support they need. So in a way, you already know that logistics plays a lot of value. It has a lot of value when it comes to prosecuting a war. And when those elements, are no longer working efficiently, then you start having issues like this. So the Mossad is basically exposing Esau's system. The supply chain, to bring munitions on board, it's going to take a while. But then you're talking about human capital, people that signed up to join the military, and then they cannot proceed further because the basic supplies are no longer available. You have the shortage of food, you have the shortage of hygiene products, and even ever since they've been allowing women to join the military, that just adds more headache to the situation. So now you have confusion and chaos. You have emotional instability on board. So that's just the spirit Lord has put upon Babylon, the spirit of confusion. So I get a quick precept. It's going to be from the book of Psalms. All right, I get it real quick. So this is Psalms chapter 73 and 18. Surely thou didst set them in slippery places. Thou casted down. It's like thou casted them down into destruction. So that's just how Esau's system is, man. It's basically imploding. It's imploding. The model, the structure for him to build up his military might is falling apart. So now they see it, man. Despite all the legislation they've been pushing and passing, all the funding they keep pushing, the budget and all that stuff for the military, for the Department of War. It seems as if all that money cannot buy confidence. When you have a failing economy, or the so-called civilian population, and then you have a mental breakdown within the ranks, it's just a recipe for chaos, a recipe for defeat. So Psalm 73 and 18, surely thou didst set them in slippery places, thou casted them down into destruction. So when you have a slippery position, that means nothing is stable, man. Things keep on moving, shifting, in another direction. Nothing is under control anymore. And that's what's happening with the Esau's system. Ever since, they've been pushing the C-19, a lot of servicemen, were basically forced out of military, and they had to take it as it is. So that's one thing that happens. Now you got to bring in a new batch and train them again from the scratch. So when you have separation from the ranks, and then you have to rebuild again, but then you have all the faults and the kinks in the system. You have a mental health crisis. You have a situation with corruption at the top. So it all adds up. It all adds up. And then verse 19 says, how are they brought into desolation, as in the moment they are utterly consumed with terror. So the Lord is going to have to be plaguing them, man. Because now they know that the world is on the brink of World War III. They're thinking about their loved ones, they're thinking about their future, they're thinking about their safety and all that stuff. So the Most High is pulling away that spirit of confidence, that spirit of pride. The Lord is pulling it apart. So let's see. Proverbs 16 and 18. Pride goeth before destruction, and haughty spirit before a fall. Yeah, so when you have situations like this, it proves to you that those that use the military as a front to enrich themselves, they have to understand the consequences, that the model of dominance is not effective anymore, man, because the truth is already catching up, man. the truth is catching up, and the power of deception is fading away. All right. Get a quick precept for that. All right. So it's going to be from the book of Second Ezra. All right. So Second Ezra chapter 6 verse 27. For evil shall be put out, and deceit shall be quenched. So we're seeing the elements of that happening. All right. We're seeing how the Lord is using His word to quench that spirit of deception. When the spirit of truth begins to gain momentum, you're going to see a lot of legislation, key legislation, being passed within Esau's government around the world, to suppress the truth, suppress the uproars of the people. The uproars of the people is not because of, they want to live a life of lies and all that stuff. They just want the basic necessities. They know that they're not going to be so-called rich. They just want goods to be affordable. They want basic health care, basic education, basic compensation for their employment, and that's about it. A fair wage. That's all. But when the people keep on protesting, when you have a closure of all these production plants, you have mass layoffs from all these big corporations like Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, IBM, UPS, FedEx, Walmart, all that, it affects them, and it becomes a challenge for the people to find their next set of endeavors to maintain their lives, man. Because being unemployed in the person's youth, when a person is young with the youth on their side, it's it's kind of manageable. But when a person is up in age, and they're basically trying to hold on, man, especially senior citizens, people approaching that age range, they're basically trying to stretch their so-called entitlement rewards, or let me say their social security, their disability benefits, and all that stuff. They're trying to stretch it to make sure it gets them into the next month and the months after that. All right. So when you have cuts in social programs, just like the SNAP benefits, and then they change the requirements, a lot of people get forced out, and it becomes a headache. It becomes a challenge. So that's why people protest on the street, man. Folks that think that they could retire, in peace, now they have to go to food banks and line up. So that's going to cause more people petitioning the government for redress. All right. So Second Ezra 6 and 28. As for faith, it shall flourish. Corruption shall be overcome. So now you see that the truth is coming out. All right, and the power of lies is just dwindling. All right, and the truth which had been so long without fruit shall be declared. So when the word of the Lord, the gospel of the Lord, the Mashiach Yahushua, is being preached throughout the four corners of the earth, a lot of people don't understand. But when the signs begin to show up, all of a sudden the people want to listen. When you have the earthquakes, people want to listen. When you hear about the wars, people want to listen. When you hear about natural disasters, eclipses, and all that stuff, natural phenomena, people want to listen. So eventually they're gonna have to deal with it, man. So Esau's upset, man, that he can no longer, you know, mislead the people like he used to. So now he has to deal with the consequences. All right. So I'll get a quick precept. All right. So Jeremiah chapter 49 and 10. But I have made Esau bare. I have uncovered his secret places. He shall not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, his brethren and his neighbors, and he is not. Yeah, so this Edomites, man. Their system of rulership is falling apart. You know, it's falling apart. You read the news and check out the data about foreclosures and delinquencies and all that stuff. It's endemic, man. A lot of people cannot keep up anymore with the system. All right, they've stuck with the basic minimums. So now all they can do is just look for other opportunities to keep up and catch up. But when those opportunities begin to disappear, now they're in trouble. I'm saying trouble, man. They're in a world of trouble. Yeah, so that's what happens, man, when a system is beginning to fall apart. When the Lord begins to tear down the empire of Esau. Protests over here in United States, protests in South America and Central America, because the folks don't want Esau ruling over them anymore, man. Even in Europe, and then you talk about Africa and Asia, folks are upset. Living under a system that doesn't honor the dignity of humanity. And when you have that type of response from the people at the bottom, all of a sudden the people at the top feel threatened. Now they have to bring out their playbook to see what they can do to manipulate the people. When manipulation doesn't work, now they have to create extra chaos, releasing pathogens into the environment. So that's what Esau does. That's part of his playbook. And, this is what the Lord has revealed, to his servants, the prophets, of what we should expect in these last days, man. Because when the so-called elites cannot have their way with the people anymore, man, when they feel as if their grip is fading into the background, it's fading into the shadows. They want to create an event. They want to create a situation. They want to create an environment to foster instability. Now they have to tear down, the economic opportunities of the people. Now they have to control more land, control more resources. Now the people are struggling because of the greed of the people at the top. When the power is concentrated in the hands of the wicked, what do you think the people at the bottom are going to be dealing with? So it's just a matter of time that the Lord will have to turn up the heat in this situation. All right, because the Lord has to turn up the heat, man. This is just the beginning. You hear when we hear the soldiers complaining about basics and all that stuff. You at sea for over 9 months. That's That's a situation that their mindset will have to deal with. You can imagine when our foreparents were taken into captivity, they had to spend months in the belly of a sheep, you know, defecating upon each other, vomiting upon each other, sweating upon each other, folks just dying in the belly of the sheep. You know, it's hard, it's worse. So you can imagine, man, when the Lord made it possible, for us to survive through that dark time, what do you think is going to happen to those people that the Lord's not going to give them a chance of survival? So now these soldiers, man, when the SHTF hits the fan and the battle gets extremely hot, there'll be no turning back, man, to return back to the home front, man. They're gonna have to deal with it, and then we have to deal with troops, having a plan for invasion, boots on the ground and all that stuff. So, it's gonna have a lot of casualties on both sides. That's one thing you have to take into account. So the book of Habakkuk chapter 2 and 5 says that, yea, also because he transgressed by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth a home, alright? He's always invading people's territories. He's always redrawing the maps. The scripture tells you, according to the word of the Lord, that you shouldn't alter the geography of the people's land. Every nation has their borders, but what does Esau do? He doesn't want to recognize it. He wants to redraw it. So what does that make him? He makes him a vessel that's against order, against the power of Yahweh Hashem Shai, Hashem Krakadash. So Esau has a lot to account for. Alright, so the book of Habakkuk chapter 2 and 5, yet also because he transgressed by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Yeah, so that's what Esau is good at, man. Forcing people on the barrel of a gun to be under his dominion, and that's the issue. He doesn't want to lose her. When you see our people walking in the mines, on the ground, working all types of hours round the clock just to keep Esau's economic system alive. It makes you wonder how that makes the Lord feel. The oppression of our people. So that's why I have to get this. Precept real quick. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 and 8. If thou seest the oppression of the poor, and the violent perverting of judgment, and justice in the province, marvel not at the matter, for he that is higher than the highest regarded it, and dare be higher than they. So the Most High is not blind to what Esau has been doing. The Lord will have to build up a response against the elites. The Lord will have to put a spotlight on them, and that's what this situation, this issue with the Strait of Hormuz is It's exposing. It's exposing the major players that's pulling the strings. Folks that you never really used to look at. Now the Most High is making you look at them. And then you understand that the judgment of the Lord is about to be visited upon the earth. So, Job chapter 20 and 22, it says, in the fullness of his sufficiency, he shall be in straight. So, at the peak of his power, he's going to be experiencing failure. He's going to be experiencing all types of friction within his system. All right, you're going to be having people running for office against this monolithic system of corruption. When the people no longer care about who spends the most money, Esau begins to panic. He wants to create a false narrative. And when the people don't fall for it no more, all of a sudden he has to go to the next card on deck. He has to squeeze the people into submission, squeeze them into, what would you call it, man? Squeeze them into, how would you put it, man? I know squeezing them into submission. That's a matter of power struggle. So I'll just leave it at that. All right. Job 20:22. In the fullness of his sufficiency, he shall be in straits. Every hand of the wicked shall come upon him. So the people at the bottom, when we look at the word for wicked in that Job 20:22 is basically amal, meaning the so-called laborers, man. So the so-called working class, they're going to be leading protests all up and down the streets, man. They're going to be organizing. They're going to be boycotting. All that boycotting of this Israeli made goods. It's going to be it's going to be heavy. You're going to have more tensions. Between the so-called Americans and these so-called Israelis, man. The so-called synagogues is going to be under heavy protection, by law enforcement, and that's just what's going to happen when you have the collapse of Esau's power structure. The Lord is showing that, Esau is falling apart, his kingdom is falling apart, all right? So you just have to deal with the Most High, tightening his grip on the neck of these Edomites, man. The so-called Rothschilds are not happy, with the way things are going. The Rockefellers are not happy. Now they want to go ahead and push this MOTB agenda. So eventually, they're gonna fail anyway. They see the handwriting on the wall. Whether they want to have puppets over there in the Middle East, so they could create a false flag, or the sleeper cells that they are funding. It's not going to alter the resolve of the people, man. The people don't care about no sleeper cells anymore, man. They're tired of the little hats pulling the strings in their government. They've seen the scam of 9/11. They've seen the scam of World War II. They've seen the scam of World War One. They've seen all the scams. They've looked through the books. They've looked through all the historical documents. They've seen the playbook. They've seen the falsehood. So now they're going to be ready. You know, they're gonna be stocking up on weapons and ammunition. They're gonna be reading all types of articles to to understand what they're dealing with, and that's just the truth. You know, bearing fruit upon the earth. The Lord has to expose the evil and the good. So all these senators like to pretend that they are against the system. Yeah, they're gonna be put in check. Very soon. So it's gonna be horrible. Upon the streets of America, man. So that's just what you gotta deal with, man. That's what you gotta deal with. That's just the beauty of life. There's no need to be upset. The Lord has to tear Babylon apart. So, I don't think I'll need to play this video about multiple sailors on USS Abraham Lincoln trying to go aboard amid extending their tour and all that stuff. That's just the Lord making it happen. That's not. It's just the Lord. Breaking them apart. That's how the Lord operates, man. He knows a man's weak points. So that's the point of this lesson. And Baratazar, you've been edified, and here prepare for more judgments upon the earth. See how the Lord has to visit the world He has made. Shalom.